Google built into their Android operating system the ability to kind of on the background detect movements using these sensors that are built into our phones day in, day out. It turns out that it actually identified some very early pre-shock tremors of these horrific earthquakes that have caused so much damage to Venezuela and unfortunately killed so many people. But actually, this early warning alert system may well have saved lives because more than 10 million people received these alerts. Sometimes, seconds or minutes before actually the earthquake began, meant that they could get to safety.
The gaming console in the corner of your living room collecting dust could actually start increasing in value. Tech firms are hiking the prices of their products due to rising cost of components needed to build the machines. Let's talk about this and other tech stories with Chris Stokel-Walker, our resident tech expert. Chris, a very good afternoon.
Afternoon, Fee.
So this is Ramageddon, is it?
It is, which is an interesting name for what is at its heart a very boring subject, but an important one nonetheless to all of us. So within all of our devices, whether it is a smartphone, a games console, your laptop, your PC, your iPad, whatever it is that you use, there are these memory chips. Now, these memory chips are not the same ones that we have talked about many times in the past on this program, with the fixation on so-called GPUs, those AI chips that are really important. These are the more prosaic versions of that technology that just allow you to store information on your device. Not quite a hard drive, but the thing that actually allows you to run multiple programs at once. The problem is, these things are created in the same factories by the same companies as those GPUs that are really popular within the AI sector. And those companies in question are looking at the prices that they are getting for GPUs for the AI chips. They're looking at the prices that they would get for the RAM memory chips. And they're thinking, do I want to produce these really high value, high margin GPUs, or do I want to stick with my kind of old fashioned RAM production? And actually means that we're really facing a shortage of the latter.
So prices going up, are they inevitable? Do these companies not have the ability to actually soak up price increases and not pass them on to us?
That would be lovely if it were the case, but unfortunately, capitalism ruins everything, I think, in these sorts of instances, Fee. So the reality is that these companies, A, they like to keep their margins. B, it's very difficult actually to spin up new factories to produce these sorts of chips, just because they require high precision machinery. That machinery happens to be in extreme demand at the minute because of this whole AI revolution and the GPU demand going through the roof. And so the truth is that they are very much constrained on the supply side. And obviously you mentioned the cost of consoles and things like that. We're in a remarkable situation, which I don't think we've ever actually had in the history of computer hardware, where products that are getting older are actually getting more expensive. So if you are a parent or a grandparent and perhaps you want to buy your child or your grandchild the latest Xbox, which came out in 2020. That is a 6-year-old console that has gone up by basically around about 70% from its listing price in 2020 to now. Usually these things go down significantly in price as they get older, and we expect the new generation to arrive. But in this instance, that is not happening.
Okay, so should we also, by logical default, be hanging on to absolutely everything that we've got at the moment, because in future years the value might have increased?
When it comes to memory chips, absolutely. So you will have routing around probably your drawers and things like that in the house, the spare cupboard. You will have little bits of old gadgets and gizmos that may well actually be much more valuable than you thought. Now, probably not in terms of on a second-hand market all that expensive, but you might find that you get 15, 20 quid, 30, 40 quid, depending on the size of the RAM that you have. And actually, ironically, I have one just on my desk here that I took out of an old laptop, which is an 8 GB stick of RAM, which it's not that big. It's about 3 inches wide, 1 inch long or so. Basically pulled it out of the back of my laptop because I think that actually that could become quite a valuable thing in the near future, or rather it's more valuable in my hands to perhaps sell on to someone else than it is to just go in the bin or to add to that massive landfill problem that we have
Yeah.
with e-waste.
And forgive my ignorance, Chris, is it easy to take that out of a laptop? Is it like butchering gizzards?
I've never butchered a gizzard, to be honest with you, so I'm not entirely certain whether or not that would be a fair analogy. I mean, in terms of laptops, it is a little bit tricky. So you need to have just an ordinary screwdriver. You have things on the base of this. I wouldn't recommend that everybody just starts rooting around and doing this as and when, although there are very useful guides on how to do so on the internet, YouTube videos, and so on and so forth. If you're, for instance, someone who has a child or a grandchild who had a gaming PC that they no longer really use. Perhaps you bought it 4 or 5 years ago. You could actually be sitting on a couple £100 worth of equipment there that may not be being used anymore. So with that, it is much easier often. The bigger the PC rather than the laptop, the easier generally it is to get in and take these things out because they are built modularly. Whereas with a laptop and certainly with an iPad, these sorts of things are designed for the form factor. They're often crammed into very small spaces. So I would probably just take it to a local computer shop and they can ask them to do it instead.
Right, that's a very, very sensible suggestion. Let's talk about something completely different, Chris. Millions of people were alerted to the earthquake in Venezuela before they felt it via an alert on their Android phone. Tell us more about this technology, which I think most people don't realise they have at their fingertips.
No, not at all. And this is the thing that is absolutely fascinating. So within those phones and those devices that we talked about, you have, as well as the RAM crammed in there, a whole load of sensors, some of which are used just innocuously. So, for instance, if you have, not in this case an Android phone, but an Apple iPhone, and you are driving, you might notice that sometimes you are limited in terms of what you can actually use on your device. My fiance has this problem with being on a train sometimes. She'll find that actually she's not allowed to access certain parts of the phone because it believes that she might be driving and therefore she can't interfere with it. That is effectively a sensor of the type that was used to detect this earthquake in advance. So Google built into their Android operating system the ability to kind of on the background detect movements using these sensors that are built into our phones day in, day out. It turns out that it actually identified some very early pre-shock tremors of these horrific earthquakes that have caused so much damage to Venezuela and unfortunately killed so many people. But actually, this early warning alert system may well have saved lives because more than 10 million people received these alerts, sometimes seconds or minutes before actually the earthquake began, meant that they could get to safety and did well. So technology is doing some good as well as an awful lot of bad stuff.
Well, that is very good to hear. Just to clarify, this is only in Android phones, though.
Yeah, this one is only in Android. Google is the only one that has this currently. So if you had an iPhone, you wouldn't have been particularly lucky. One of the things to note about that, though, is that generally across the world, Android smartphones outnumber Apple iPhones by quite a significant proportion. And that's for a whole bunch of different reasons. Generally, they have been cheaper to buy, which means that they are often more popular, particularly in places like South America and places like that. You find that the Android versus Apple split is actually quite significantly skewed in favor of Android. So, Apple, of course, has different third-party apps that you can use for this, but that requires you to actually download stuff in advance, whereas Google just bakes this into the phone that you get when you buy it off the shelf.
Right, that's interesting. I didn't realise that Androids were quite as popular as that. We seem to live in quite an Apple-dominated country then, don't we? Can you finally tell us about how AI has helped uncover text on an ancient scroll? This seems to be beyond magic because the scroll was burnt to a crisp when Mount Vesuvius erupted, and that's 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, I remember the Cambridge Latin courses I know you were talking about a couple of weeks back with listeners. And so I learned all about Vesuvius, all about Herculaneum, and all about Pompeii. Herculaneum, obviously, an amazing place if you ever go visit it, and has a treasure trove of information, including this scroll P. Herc 1667. Which, as you say, was charred in the aftermath of the eruption, never actually opened because it was too fragile to do so. But they've been able to digitally unwrap it by basically scanning the whole scroll, looking through the sort of paper that it was printed on, and figuring out what the text was underneath it using AI. AI is often very good for what we call OCR, optical character recognition, in this sort of way. And so basically, it found that there was this philosophical work talking about ethics, talking about art, talking about the realities of human behavior, which they attribute perhaps to a scholar called Chrysippus, because of the way that the names are mentioned in this piece. But it is a real indication of how we are able to use technology sometimes to unlock the deepest secrets from some of the oldest bits of stuff that we can find in these amazing archaeological sites.
I still don't understand how they've managed to do this, though, Chris, and thank you for that explanation. But when you see a picture of this burnt scroll, I can't believe that they've got so much out of it.
Yeah, so it's the layers, it's the different layers. If you imagine the scroll had actually been unfilled, then you have, in the same way that if you were writing particularly hard on a bit of paper and then you rolled it up, or have had a newspaper, for instance, and then scrolled that up into a sort of ball or whatever, you could see through that the different layers of newsprint, the different layers of text. So effectively, what they've done is they've tried to separate those layers by looking at this using AI and saying, well, this could be an A and an E, putting it all together. It would take humans ages to do otherwise, but AI can do it relatively in a jiffy.
Lovely stuff, Chris. Thank you very much indeed. I did notice a change in status there from the wonderful woman you've previously described as a girlfriend to now being fiancée. I don't know whether that is a very recent thing. If, in fact, it was years ago, and I've just been very slow to catch up, I'll say congratulations very slowly. But if it's very recent, then massive congratulations very quickly. Chris Stokel-Walker is our resident tech expert, and he joins us every Monday. You never want to miss a moment with him.